Black lady gets married off to a crippled Korean trillionaire. Doors of the penthouse bedroom slid open with a soft hiss. The room was dark, lit only by the bright city lights of Seoul shining through the giant windows. My heart was beating like a drum in my chest. I took a step inside, my heavy wedding dress rustling on the floor. I was looking for my new husband, Min-jun. I expected to find him sleeping in his wheelchair, or maybe staring out at the city with those cold, sad eyes. But what I saw made my blood turn to ice. Min-jun was there, sitting in his chair in the center of the room. But he wasn't alone. A shadow was moving behind him. It was a person dressed all in black, holding something shiny and sharp above Min-jun's neck. Min-jun didn't move. He didn't scream. It was like he was frozen. I opened my mouth to yell, to warn him. But before I could make a sound, the person in black looked up. Their eyes were covered by night vision goggles, glowing green in the dark. They raised a gloved finger to their lips in a terrifying motion. Then I saw the red laser dot. It wasn't on Min-jun. It was right in the middle of my own forehead. Stop. Before we find out who is in the room and what happens next, I have a very important question for you. If you want to see Nia survive this night and uncover the secrets of the Choi family, smash that like button right now. It really helps us out. Also, I want to know where my amazing viewers are from. Drop a comment down below with your country's flag. Are you watching from the US, Nigeria, India? Let me know in the comments. Now let's go back to where it all began. 2 weeks before that terrifying night, I was standing in the middle of a disaster. My name is Nia. I lived in a small, dusty apartment in Brooklyn, New York. I was a fashion designer, but not the famous kind. I was the eating instant noodles for dinner kind. My studio was full of beautiful dresses I had made with my own hands. They were colorful, bold, and full of life just like me. But nobody was buying them. The landlord had pasted a bright red eviction notice on my door that morning. It said, "Pay now or get out." I was staring at it, trying to keep from crying, when the door burst open. My mother, Rose, ran in. She wasn't wearing her usual bright smile. Her face was gray and she was shaking. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Nia, Nia, you have to hide," she screamed, locking the door behind her with trembling hands. "Mama? What's wrong?" I asked, dropping my sketchbook. "Is it Dad?" My dad, Samuel, was a good man, but he was bad with money. He always thought he could win big by gambling. He never won. "He did it again," Mama Rose sobbed, sliding down to the floor. "He borrowed money from bad men. Very bad men. The kind who don't call the police. The kind who break legs." "How much, Mama?" I asked, kneeling beside her. My stomach felt like I had swallowed a stone. $2 million, she whispered. I gasped. 2 million? We didn't even have $200. "We can't pay that. Nobody can pay that. They said they will take you," Mama cried, grabbing my hands. "They said if we don't pay by tonight, they are coming for you. They want to sell you, Nia." Suddenly, there was a loud bang on the door. The wood splintered. Mama screamed and pulled me behind her. "Open up!" A deep voice boomed from the hallway. I looked around for a weapon. My scissors? My heavy iron? The door shook again. Boom! Then, everything went quiet. We heard muffled voices outside. Then polite knocking. "Mrs. King? Miss Nia?" A smooth, calm voice asked. "Please open the door. We are not the loan sharks. We are the solution." I walked to the door slowly and peeked through the peephole. Standing there was a man in a perfect black suit. He looked like he stepped out of a movie. Behind him were 2 giant bodyguards. I opened the door just a crack. "Who are you?" "I am Secretary Lee," the man said, bowing slightly. "I work for the Choi Corporation in South Korea. My boss, Mr. Choi Min-jun, has a proposition for you." He pushed a thick envelope through the crack. I opened it. Inside was a contract. It was thick and full of big words, but the main point was simple. Mr. Choi Min-jun needed a wife. Not a real wife, but a fake one. He needed an American wife to help his company expand. The contract said if I married him for 1 year, He would pay off my father's entire debt. He would give my parents a new house. And he would give me $5 million to start my fashion brand. Why me? I asked, looking at Secretary Lee. I'm nobody. Mr. Choi needs someone desperate, Secretary Lee said, his eyes cold. Someone who will sign quickly and not ask questions. Someone who will disappear when the year is over. I looked at my mother. She was still on the floor, terrified. I thought about my father, probably hiding in a basement somewhere. I looked at my beautiful dresses that nobody wanted to buy. 1 year, I asked. 1 year, Secretary Lee confirmed. You leave tonight. I took a deep breath. I signed the paper. The flight to South Korea was on a private jet. It was bigger than my entire apartment building. The seats were made of soft leather that smelled like expensive cars. A flight attendant brought me food I couldn't pronounce, but it tasted like heaven. I should have been happy. I was safe. My parents were safe. But I felt like a prisoner. When we landed in Seoul, it was raining. A long line of black cars waited for me on the runway. Secretary Lee led me to the biggest car. Mr. Min-jun is waiting at the estate, he said. He handed me a tablet. Read this. These are the rules. I looked at the screen. Rule 1. Do not speak to the press. Rule 2. Do not enter the west wing of the house. Rule 3. Do not touch Mr. Choi. Rule 4. Do not expect love. The drive took an hour. We drove past tall glass buildings and bright neon signs, up a winding road to a huge mansion on top of a hill. It looked like a castle, but dark and scary. The gates opened slowly. Inside, the house was silent. A woman was waiting for me in the giant hallway. She was older, with hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She wore a traditional Korean dress that looked like it cost more than my life. This was Madame Choi, Min-jun's mother. So, she said, looking me up and down like I was a piece of dirty laundry. This is the American purchase. My name is Nia, I said, trying to stand tall. I do not care what your name is, she snapped. You are here to play a role. Smile for the cameras. Stand next to my son. And keep your mouth shut. Do you understand? Yes, I said quietly. Good. The wedding is in 2 hours. Go get changed. She clapped her hands, and 3 maids rushed forward to grab me. They took me to a room filled with mirrors. They scrubbed my skin until it was pink. They pulled my hair into a tight bun. Then they put me in the dress. It was breathtaking. It was a white ball gown with delicate lace sleeves and thousands of tiny crystals sewn into the skirt. When I moved, it sparkled like diamonds. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a bride. I saw a doll. A doll in a very expensive box. The wedding was in the garden. It was full of people in suits and fancy dresses, but I didn't know a single one of them. There was no music, only the sound of whispers. That's her. The gold digger? Poor Min-jun. I walked down the aisle alone. My father wasn't there to walk me. My mother was back in New York. At the end of the aisle, waiting for me, was a man in a wheelchair. This was Min-jun. He was beautiful. That was the only word for it. He had dark, messy hair that fell over his forehead. His cheekbones were sharp, like they were cut from glass. But his eyes were the darkest things I had ever seen. They were empty. He didn't smile. He didn't even look at me. He just stared straight ahead at the priest. I reached the altar and stood next to him. I could smell his cologne. It smelled like rain and wood. Do you take this woman? The priest asked. Min-jun didn't answer for a long time. The silence stretched out. People started to shift in their seats. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel. I do. And do you, Nia, take this man? I looked at his profile. He looked so lonely. I do. The priest declared us husband and wife. Min-jun didn't kiss me. He didn't even hold my hand. He just spun his wheelchair around and rolled away, down the aisle, leaving me standing there alone. The reception was a blur. I stood by myself in a corner, holding a glass of champagne I didn't drink. People came up to me and said fake nice things, but their eyes were laughing at me. Then, a young woman walked up to me. She was gorgeous. wearing a red dress that was way too short for a wedding. She had a cruel smile. "So, you're the new pet," she said, sipping her drink. "Excuse me?" I asked. "I'm Hannah, Min-jun's sister," she said. "I give you 2 weeks. The last wife lasted 3. "There was a last wife?" I asked, surprised. Hannah laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Oh, honey, didn't they tell you? Min-jun is cursed. Everyone who gets close to him, bad things happen. Accidents." She leaned in close, her perfume smelling sickly sweet. "Watch your step, American girl. The stairs in this house are very slippery." She walked away, leaving me shivering. Finally, the night ended. Secretary Lee told me it was time to go to the master suite. My stomach did flip-flops. I walked up the grand staircase, my legs shaking. I reached the double doors at the end of the hallway. I knocked softly. No answer. I pushed them open. The room was huge. It had a fireplace, a giant bed with silk sheets, and a wall made entirely of glass. Min-jun was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, his back to me. He had taken off his suit jacket and was wearing a white shirt. "Close the door," he said without turning around. Closed it. The click of the lock sounded very loud. "Min-jun," I started. "We need to talk about—" "There is nothing to talk about," he said, spinning his chair around. "You sleep on the couch. I sleep in the bed. Do not speak to me. Do not look at me. And never, ever touch me." "I'm not a dog, Min-jun," I said, feeling a spark of anger. "I'm a human being. We have to live together for a year. Can't we at least be friends?" He laughed. It was a dry, bitter sound. He rolled his chair closer to me until he was just a few feet away. I could see the pain in his eyes now. It wasn't just emptiness. It was fury. "Friends?" he sneered. "You are here for the money. I am here to secure my inheritance. That is a business deal, not a friendship. Do not pretend you care. Just take your check and stay out of my way." "I'm doing this to save my parents," I shouted back. "I didn't want this any more than you did." Min-jun stared at me. For a second, he looked surprised. He opened his mouth to say something, but then he winced. He grabbed his legs, his face twisting in pain. "Are you okay?" I took a step forward, reaching out to help him. "Don't touch me," he roared, slapping my hand away. "Get out. Go to the bathroom. Anywhere but here." I stepped back, hurt tears stinging my eyes. "Fine. I'll go." I grabbed my bag and stormed into the massive bathroom attached to the bedroom. I slammed the door and locked it. I sank down onto the cold tile floor and cried. I cried for my home, for my dreams, and for the cold, broken man in the other room. I stayed in there for maybe an hour. I washed my face and changed into my silk pajamas. I told myself I was strong. I was Nia King. I could survive anything, even a mean, crippled billionaire. I decided to go back out and sleep on the couch like he said. I would ignore him. Two can play at this game. I unlocked the bathroom door quietly. The bedroom was dark now. The lights were off. "Min-jun," I whispered. "I'm going to the couch." There was no answer. I stepped into the room. It was silent, too silent. Then I heard it, the sound of heavy breathing. But it wasn't coming from the bed. It was coming from the center of the room. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. I saw the silhouette of Min-jun in his wheelchair. But then I saw the other shadow. A tall figure, dressed in a black tactical suit, standing right behind Min-jun's chair. They had a needle in their hand. My heart stopped. The figure looked up. The green glow of night vision goggles stared right at me. This was it. The curse Hannah talked about. The bad things. The figure moved fast. They raised a hand, pointing something black and metallic at me. A gun. A tiny red dot appeared on my chest, right over my heart. Min-jun suddenly groaned, his head lolling to the side like he was drugged. He was defenseless. The assassin looked at me, then back at Min-jun. They were going to kill him, and then they were going to kill me. I looked around for anything to throw. A lamp? A book? Then the assassin spoke. Their voice was distorted, robotic. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Choi. The assassin's finger tightened on the trigger. I screamed, and then the room exploded in light. The bright light burned my eyes. I threw my hands up to cover my face, screaming as loud as I could. I expected to feel the bullet. I expected to die, but the shot never came. Secure the perimeter. Go, 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 voices shouted. I blinked, trying to see through the white spots in my vision. The room was suddenly full of men in gray tactical gear. They had big guns and were swarming the room like angry bees. I looked at the center of the room. Min-jun was slumped over in his wheelchair, his head hanging down on his chest. He looked like a rag doll. And the assassin, the person with the red laser, gone. I spun around, looking at the open balcony doors. The curtains were flapping wildly in the wind. I ran to the edge and looked down. We were on the 50th floor. There was nothing below but a sheer drop to the concrete streets. No ropes, no ladder. He jumped? I whispered, my hands shaking uncontrollably. How could he jump? Mrs. Choi, step away from the window, a cold voice said behind me. I turned around. Secretary Lee was standing there. He wasn't wearing pajamas. He was in his perfect black suit, just like always. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. Someone was here, I yelled, pointing at the empty space. A man in black. He had a gun. He had a needle. He was going to kill Min-jun. Secretary Lee adjusted his glasses. He walked over to Min-jun and checked his pulse. He is just sleeping, Mrs. Choi. He took his medication. No, I shouted. I saw it. A red laser. Right on my forehead. Secretary Lee looked at the security guards. He nodded once. The guards lowered their guns and started to walk out. Wait, I cried. Aren't you going to chase him? He's getting away. There is no one to chase, ma'am, Secretary Lee said calmly. The perimeter alarms were not tripped. The windows were locked from the outside. You are stressed. You are imagining things. Imagining things? I felt like I was going to explode. The balcony door is wide open. You left it open for fresh air, Secretary Lee said smoothly. He walked over and closed the glass doors. Click. See? Safe. He wheeled Min-jun towards the bed. He lifted my husband, who was dead weight, and placed him gently onto the silk sheets. Min-jun didn't wake up. He didn't even groan. Go to sleep, Mrs. Choi, Secretary Lee said, walking to the door. Tomorrow is a big day. You have your first family breakfast. You do not want to look hysterical. The door clicked shut. The lock turned. I was alone again. I stood in the middle of the room, shivering. I knew what I saw. I knew I wasn't crazy. I looked down at the floor where the assassin had stood. There, caught in the plush white carpet, was something small. I knelt down and picked it up. It was a black button. But it wasn't a normal button. It had a strange symbol etched into it. A silver dragon eating its own tail. I squeezed the button in my hand. I am not crazy, I told myself, and I am going to prove it. The next morning, the sun was shining brightly, but the dining room felt like a freezer. The table was long enough to seat 20 people, but only 4 of us were sitting there. At the head of the table sat Madame Choi, Min-jun's mother. To her right was Hannah, the evil sister. To her left sat Min-jun, looking pale and tired. And then there was me, sitting at the far end, miles away from everyone else. Breakfast was silent. The only sound was the clink of silver spoons on porcelain bowls. We were eating traditional porridge, but it tasted like glue in my mouth. So, Madame Choi said without looking up, I heard there was a disturbance last night. I looked up quickly. Yes, someone broke into our room. They tried to. Nia had a nightmare. Min-jun cut me off. His voice was low and raspy. He didn't look at me. He was staring at his water glass. I dropped my spoon. It made a loud clang. A nightmare? Min-jun, you were there. He had a needle to your neck. Hannah laughed. She covered her mouth with a napkin, but her eyes were cruel. Oh, poor thing. The jet lag must be making her see ghosts. Or maybe she's just seeking attention. I am not seeking attention. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I found proof. I found a button. Sit down. Madame Choi slammed her hand on the table. The silence was deafening. The maids in the corner froze. In this house we do not shout, Madame Choi hissed. And we do not tell lies. There are no intruders in the Choi estate. We have the best security in the world. If you cannot handle the pressure of being a Choi wife, perhaps we should send you back to Brooklyn. I'm sure the loan sharks are still looking for your father. My blood ran cold. She knew. Of course she knew. She owned me. I slowly sat back down. I'm sorry, I whispered. Eat your porridge, Madame Choi commanded. I looked at Min-jun, begging him with my eyes to say something, to defend me, to tell the truth. He slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were dark pools of nothing. Stop making a scene, he said coldly. You are embarrassing me. My heart broke a little bit more. I looked down at my bowl and swallowed the lump in my throat. The forbidden door. After breakfast, Min-jun went to his office in the East Wing. Madame Choi went to her garden club. Hannah went shopping. I was left alone in the giant, empty house. I remembered the rules Secretary Lee gave me. Rule 2. Do not enter the West Wing. I looked down at the black button in my pocket. The dragon eating its tail. I had seen that symbol somewhere before. Where was it? I walked through the hallways, looking at the paintings on the walls. Pictures of old Korean men with stern faces. Pictures of landscapes. And then I saw it. At the very end of the main hall, there was a huge painting of the house as it looked 100 years ago. In the corner of the painting, on a flag flying above the West Wing, was the symbol. The silver dragon. The West Wing wasn't just a part of the house. It was the key. I checked the hallway. Empty. The security cameras were buzzing, but I noticed something strange. Every 10 seconds, the camera light blinked red, then turned off for 3 seconds before turning green again. A blind spot. I waited. Blink. Red. Off. I ran. I sprinted down the corridor toward the heavy double doors of the West Wing. They were made of dark oak wood and looked like they hadn't been opened in years. I tried the handle. Locked. Of course. I looked around. Next to the door was a potted plant. I dug my fingers into the soil. In movies, people always hide keys in plants. Nothing. Just dirt. I sighed and leaned against the door. Click. The door wasn't locked. It was just stuck. My heart hammered in my chest. I pushed harder. The wood groaned, and the door creaked open just enough for me to squeeze through. I slipped inside. The air in the West Wing was stale and dusty. It smelled like old paper and dried flowers. The windows were covered with heavy velvet drapes, making it very dark. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway was lined with doors. Most of them were empty bedrooms covered in white sheets. But at the end of the hall, one door was slightly open. A faint blue light was glowing from inside. I walked toward it on tiptoes. My sneakers squeaked on the floor, sounding like gunshots in the quiet house. I reached the door and peeked inside. It wasn't a bedroom. It looked like a hospital room. There were monitors for drips and a metal table. But the weirdest thing was the walls. They were covered in photos. Hundreds of them. I stepped inside and shone my light on the wall. I gasped. The photos were of me. Me walking to the bakery in New York. Me sewing in my studio. Me arguing with my landlord. Me sleeping on the plane. Me at the wedding yesterday. They had been watching me. Not just since yesterday. For months. Maybe years. Why? I whispered, touching a photo of myself buying coffee in Brooklyn. Because you are the perfect match, a voice said from the shadows. I spun around, dropping my phone. The flashlight spun on the floor, casting crazy shadows on the walls. Who's there? I yelled, grabbing a metal tray from the table as a weapon. A figure stepped out from behind a curtain. It wasn't the assassin. It wasn't Min-jun. It was a young woman. She was wearing a nurse's uniform. She looked terrified. Please, don't hurt me, she whispered. I'm just the caretaker. Who are you? I demanded. Why are there pictures of me? I am Soyeon, she said. I take care of the patients. What patients? I asked. Min-jun is in the other wing. Soyeon looked at the door nervously. Not him, the others. She pointed to a curtain at the back of the room. What's behind there? I asked, stepping closer. Don't look, Soyeon begged, tears filling her eyes. If you look, you can never leave. I'm already a prisoner, I said. Show me. I walked past her and ripped the curtain open. Behind the curtain were 3 glass tanks, tall enough to hold a person. They were filled with a bubbling blue liquid. In the first tank was a woman. She had long black hair and pale skin. She looked like she was sleeping. In the second tank was another woman. She had blonde hair. In the third tank, I screamed. Couldn't help it. I screamed so loud my throat tore. The third tank was empty, but taped to the glass was a photo of me, and written in red marker on the glass were the words, Subject 4? Preparation complete. They aren't just wives, Nia, Soyeon whispered behind me. They are parts. Spare parts. Spare parts for who? I choked out, backing away. For him, she said. For the master. Suddenly, the blue light in the room turned red. A siren started to wail. Whoop, whoop, whoop. They know, Soyeon cried. Run. You have to run. I turned to the door, but it slammed shut with a loud metallic clang. The electronic lock engaged. We were trapped. Then, a screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a live video feed. My knees gave out. The video showed a small, shabby living room in Brooklyn. My living room. My mother was sitting on the couch, knitting. My father was pacing the floor. Mama! I yelled at the screen, even though I knew she couldn't hear me. A red laser dot appeared on my mother's forehead, just like the one I saw last night. A distorted voice boomed over the speakers in the room. Mrs. Choi, you have broken rule number 2. I stared at the screen, tears streaming down my face. Leave them alone. Please. We can touch them anytime we want, the voice said. If you want them to live, you will do exactly what we say. What do you want? I sobbed. The voice laughed. It sounded like grinding metal. Go back to your room. Put on the red dress hanging in your closet. And come to the basement. The real wedding is about to begin. The screen went black. The door to the hallway clicked open. I looked at Soyeon. She was huddled in the corner, praying. I looked at the empty tank with my photo on it. I had to save my parents. I had to save myself. But first, I had to meet the monster in the basement. I wiped my tears. I wasn't just a fashion designer anymore. I was a survivor. I'm coming, I whispered to the darkness. Chapter 3. I ran out of the West Wing as fast as my legs could carry me. The red siren light was still flashing in my mind, but the hallway was quiet again. The only sound was my own heavy breathing and the squeak of my sneakers on the marble floor. I didn't look back at the room with the tanks. I didn't look back at Soyeon, the scared nurse. I just ran. The voice on the speaker had been clear. Go to your room. Put on the red dress. Come to the basement. If I didn't do it, my parents in Brooklyn would die. I had seen the red laser on my mother's forehead. I knew these people weren't joking. They were monsters. I burst into my bedroom. It was cold and empty. The balcony doors were closed now, but the curtains were still moving slightly from the air conditioner. I marched straight to the closet. I threw open the doors. There, hanging in the very center, was a dress I had never seen before. It wasn't white like my wedding dress. It was red. Deep, dark red, like fresh blood. It was made of heavy velvet and looked like something a queen would wear to a funeral. My hands were shaking as I unzipped my jeans. I felt sick. I felt like a sheep dressing itself up for the wolves. I pulled the heavy red dress over my head. It fit perfectly, hugging my body like a second skin. It was beautiful, but it felt suffocating. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like Nia King, the girl who loved donuts and loud music. I looked like a sacrifice. I'm coming, Mama, I whispered to the empty room. I walked out of the room and headed for the elevator at the end of the hall. I had never used this elevator before. It was gold and shiny. I pressed the button for B, basement. The doors slid shut, and the elevator began to go down. It went past the first floor. It went past the garage. Kept going down deeper into the ground. My ears popped. The air grew colder. Ding. The doors opened. I wasn't in a basement. I was in a cathedral. The room was massive, with stone walls and high arched ceilings. But instead of church benches, there were rows of medical equipment. Beeping heart monitors, trays of shiny silver tools, and bright surgical lights. In the center of the room was a platform. On the platform was a chair. And in the chair sat Min-jun. He was wearing a black tuxedo, but his shirt was unbuttoned at the top. He looked pale, sweating, and his eyes were closed. He looked like he was in pain. Standing next to him was Madame Choi. She was wearing a long black gown and holding a lit candle. Next to her was Secretary Lee holding a tablet. And surrounding them were 6 men in red robes, their faces covered by hoods. "Welcome, Nia," Madame Choi said. Her voice echoed off the stone walls. She was smiling, but it was the scariest smile I had ever seen. "You look stunning in red. It is your color." I walked slowly toward the platform. My heels clicked on the stone floor. "Where are my parents?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "I did what you asked. Leave them alone." "They are safe," Secretary Lee said, tapping his tablet. "For now. As long as the ceremony is completed." "What ceremony?" I asked, stopping at the bottom of the steps. "We are already married." "That was a legal marriage," Madame Choi said, stepping forward. "A marriage for the world to see. This is the blood marriage. This is the marriage that matters." She gestured to the empty table next to Min-jun. It was a metal operating table with leather straps. "Min-jun is sick, Nia," Madame Choi said softly, like she was talking to a child. "He has a very rare condition. His heart is weak. It is failing. Our family has a curse. The men in our family do not live past 30 without help." I looked at Min-jun. He opened his eyes. They were glassy and unfocused. He looked at me and I saw fear. Real fear. "Run," he mouthed. No sound came out. "Help?" I asked, taking a step back. "What kind of help?" "A transplant," Madame Choi said. "But not just any heart will do. It must be a perfect match. A rare genetic match. We searched the world for years. We tested thousands of people. And we found you." My hand flew to my chest. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "Me? Subject number 4, Secretary Lee said emotionlessly. "The other 3, they were close matches. But not perfect. Their bodies rejected the transfer. But you are the star." He pointed to the birthmark on my shoulder, hidden under the red dress. "The star of the Lee dynasty," Madame Choi whispered. "Your blood is royal, Nia, even if you don't know it. And your heart is the only thing that can save my son." "You want to kill me?" I screamed. "You want to cut out my heart?" "It is an honor," Madame Choi said, her eyes gleaming with madness. "You will live on inside him. You will be part of the Choi Empire forever. Is that not romantic?" "You're insane," I yelled. I turned to run back to the elevator, but the men in red robes moved fast. They blocked my path. They grabbed my arms. "No! Let me go!" I kicked and screamed. I bit one of the men's hands. He grunted but didn't let go. They dragged me toward the platform. "Min-jun, help me!" I screamed at my husband. Min-jun tried to move. He gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. His knuckles turned white. He tried to lift his body, but he was too weak. "Mother, stop!" Min-jun groaned. His voice was weak. "I told you, I don't want this." "Be quiet, Min-jun," Madame Choi snapped. "This is for your own good. You are the heir. You must live, even if it costs a few peasant lives." They threw me onto the metal table. The cold steel shocked my skin through the dress. I fought them, thrashing my legs, but they were too strong. They strapped my wrists. They strapped my ankles. I was trapped. Secretary Lee walked over with a tray. On the tray was a syringe filled with a glowing blue liquid, the same liquid I saw in the tanks upstairs. "This will make you sleep," he said. It will be painless. Please, I begged, tears streaming down into my ears. Please don't do this. I have a family. I have a life. Secretary Lee paused. He looked at me for a second, and I thought I saw a flicker of regret. But then he looked at Madame Choi, and the regret vanished. We all have our duties, he said. He lowered the needle toward my arm. No, Min-jun roared. It was a sound so loud, so powerful. It shook the room. Suddenly, Min-jun's wheelchair exploded. Pieces of metal flew everywhere. Madame Choi screamed and covered her face. The men in red robes stumbled back. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, I saw something that made my brain stop working. Min-jun was standing up. But he wasn't just standing. He was hovering. His legs, they weren't human legs. From the knees down, his pants were torn away by the explosion. Underneath the fabric, there was no skin. There was no bone. There was shiny, black metal. Pistons were hissing. Blue lights were pulsing in his calves. He was a cyborg. I said no. Min-jun yelled again. He took a step forward, and the stone floor cracked under his metal foot. Crack. Secretary Lee dropped the needle. It shattered on the floor. Min-jun, Madame Choi shrieked. What are you doing? You are weak. Your battery is low. My heart is weak. Min-jun growled, his eyes burning with a sudden, terrifying fire. But my legs are just fine. He moved faster than any human could move. He grabbed the nearest man in a red robe and threw him across the room like a ragdoll. The man hit the wall and slid down, unconscious. 2 other men charged at him with knives. Min-jun blocked the first knife with his forearm. The blade sparked against his metal skin. He punched the man in the chest, sending him flying. He spun around and kicked the second man. The sound of the impact was sickening. Min-jun was a machine of destruction. He wasn't the crippled, weak man I thought I married. He was a weapon. He walked toward my table. Madame Choi stood in his way, holding up her candle. Stop this instant, she commanded. I am your mother. I built you. I can turn you off. She pulled a remote control from her pocket and pressed a red button. Min-jun froze. His body went rigid. The blue lights in his legs flickered and went dark. He fell to one knee, gasping for air. You foolish boy, Madame Choi hissed, walking over to him. Did you really think you could fight me? I own your heart. I own your legs. I own your soul. She kicked him in the chest, and he fell onto his back, groaning. Proceed with the extraction, she ordered Secretary Lee. Take the girl's heart. Now, before his battery dies completely. Secretary Lee grabbed a scalpel from the tray. He walked toward me. His eyes were dead. He raised the blade above my chest. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, Mama. I tried. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out. Total darkness. Then, a sound echoed through the room. Not a scream. Not an explosion. A laugh. A low, dark, terrifying laugh. And it wasn't coming from Min-jun. It was coming from the shadows in the corner of the room. Who is there? Madame Choi screamed, her voice trembling. A spotlight clicked on, pointing at the far corner of the room. A man was sitting there in a wheelchair. My eyes widened. I looked at the man on the floor, Min-jun with his metal legs. Then I looked at the man in the corner. He had the same face, the same hair, the same eyes. He looked exactly like Min-jun. Hello, Mother, the man in the corner said, smiling a cruel smile. He tapped his fingers on his armrest. Did you really think you could replace me with a robot and I wouldn't notice? I looked back and forth between the 2 men, 2 Min-juns. One on the floor, made of metal and pain. One in the corner watching with cold amusement. The man in the corner stood up. He walked perfectly. He wasn't crippled at all. Now, the real Min-jun said, pulling a golden gun from his jacket. Let's see whose heart is stronger. He pointed the gun. Not at his mother. Not at the robot. He pointed it straight at me. The golden gun was pointed straight at my face. I stopped breathing. I stared into the barrel, waiting for the flash, waiting for the end. I looked at the man holding the gun. the man who looked exactly like my husband, but was standing on two strong legs. Then I looked at the man on the floor, the husband I knew, with metal legs that sparked and smoked. My brain felt like it was melting. Two Min-juns. One made of flesh, one made of steel. And both of them were dangerous. Madame Choi let out a shriek that sounded like a dying bird. "You!" she screamed, pointing a shaking finger at the standing man. "You are supposed to be in Switzerland. You are supposed to be in a coma." The standing Min-jun laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Surprise, mother. The coma was boring. I decided to come home early." "Kill him!" Madame Choi yelled at Secretary Lee and the red-robed guards. "Kill the imposter. He is not my son. My son is on the floor." Secretary Lee hesitated. He looked at the robot on the floor, then at the man with the gun. He raised his scalpel, his hand trembling. "Don't do it, Lee," the standing Min-jun said calmly. His eyes never left mine. "You know I never miss." Bang! The gun fired. I screamed and squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the pain. But I didn't feel anything. I heard the sound of metal hitting metal. Ping! I opened my eyes. The leather strap holding my right wrist was broken. The bullet had sliced right through the lock, missing my skin by 1 inch. "Get up," the standing Min-jun ordered me. I scrambled off the cold metal table, rubbing my sore wrist. I didn't know whether to run to him or run away from him. "Who are you?" I whispered, backing away until I hit the stone wall. "I am Choi Min-jun," he said, stepping closer. "The real one. The one born with a heart that works just fine. Thank you very much." He kicked the robot on the floor. This is a toy. A decoy I built 5 years ago when I realized my dear mother was poisoning my tea." Madame Choi's face turned purple. "You ungrateful brat. I did it for the family. You were too soft. You wanted to donate our money to charity. You wanted to marry for love. A Choi ruler must be iron. So you replaced me with actual iron," the real Min-jun said, gesturing to the cyborg. "Clever. But you made one mistake. You let him get married." He looked at me then. His eyes scanned me from head to toe in the red dress. For a second, his cold mask slipped, and I saw something like admiration. "And you picked a fighter," he added. "Get them!" Madame Choi shrieked. "Guards! Attack!" The 6 men in red robes pulled out long, curved knives. They charged at the real Min-jun. I thought he was dead. He was outnumbered. But then I saw why he was the true heir of the Choi family. He moved like water. When the first guard swung his knife, Min-jun ducked and swept the man's legs. As the guard fell, Min-jun grabbed his arm and twisted. Crack! The guard screamed. The second guard lunged. Min-jun used the golden gun like a hammer, smashing it into the man's nose. Blood sprayed on the stone floor. He didn't shoot them. He didn't need to. He was tearing them apart with his bare hands. "Nia! The elevator!" he shouted at me, throwing a guard over his shoulder. I looked at the golden elevator doors. They were 50 feet away. I started to run, my red dress flying behind me. Secretary Lee jumped in front of me. He was still holding the scalpel. He looked desperate. "I cannot let you leave, Mrs. Choi. The extraction must happen. The master demands it. Get out of my way," I yelled. I looked around for a weapon. I saw a tray of surgical tools next to the operating table. Secretary Lee lunged at me, the blade aiming for my chest. I grabbed a heavy metal tray and swung it with all my might. Clang! It hit him right in the face. Secretary Lee crumbled to the floor, unconscious. "Nice swing," the real Min-jun called out. He punched the last guard in the throat and ran over to me. He grabbed my hand. His grip was warm and rough, human, not cold metal. "We have to go. Now," he said, pulling me toward the elevator. "Wait." I dug my heels in. "What about him?" I pointed to the robot on the floor. Min-jun bot was twitching. His eyes were open, flickering between blue and red. He was looking at me with such sadness. He had tried to save me. He had defied his programming for me. "He's a toaster, Nia," the real Min-jun snapped. "Leave it. He's not a toaster. He saved my life. I pulled my hand away from the real Min-jun and ran back to the robot. Nia, no! Min-jun shouted. I knelt beside the cyborg. His chest was smoking. The explosion had damaged his power core. Min-jun, I whispered. Can you hear me? The robot's eyes focused on me. Nia, his voice cracked, sounding like a broken radio. Run. Danger. I can't leave you, I said, tears filling my eyes. You're the only one who was nice to me. Sentimental fool, Madame Choi hissed. She was standing by a control panel on the wall. She slammed her hand down on a big red lever. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. A massive steel wall began to descend from the ceiling, cutting off the elevator. She's sealing the room, the real Min-jun yelled. He ran back and grabbed me by the waist, lifting me off the ground. We're trapped. The steel wall slammed shut with a boom that shook my bones. The elevator was gone. We were locked in the cathedral with a crazy woman and a broken robot. You have nowhere to go, Madame Choi laughed. She pressed another button. Release the hounds. From the shadows at the back of the room, 4 cages opened. But it wasn't dogs that came out. It was more cyborgs. But these weren't human-like. They were monsters. They had metal bodies shaped like wolves, with razor-sharp teeth made of steel and red glowing eyes. They growled, the sound like gears grinding together. Oh, come on! The real Min-jun groaned, dropping me to my feet. He checked his gun. I only have 2 bullets left. The metal wolves began to circle us. They were snapping their jaws, drooling oil. What do we do? I asked, backing up until my back hit Min-jun's chest. I shoot the first 2, he whispered. You kick the 3rd one, and the 4th one. Well, we pray. One of the wolves lunged. Bang! Min-jun shot it in the eye. It exploded in a shower of sparks and collapsed. Bang! He shot the 2nd one. Skidded across the floor. Dead. Click, click. Out of ammo, Min-jun cursed. He threw the gun at the 3rd wolf. It bounced off its metal head harmlessly. The remaining 2 wolves crouched, ready to kill us. I closed my eyes and waited for the bite. Grrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrrr Robot Min-jun, the one on the floor, had stood up. But he looked different. The blue lights in his legs were gone. Now they were burning bright purple. His eyes were glowing purple too. He looked overloaded, dangerous. He moved so fast he was a blur. He tackled one of the metal wolves, ripping its head off with his bare hands. Oil sprayed everywhere. The last wolf jumped at me. Min-jun bot stepped in front of me and caught the wolf in midair. He crushed its metal body against his chest until it stopped moving. He dropped the scrap metal to the floor. He turned to look at us. He was smoking heavily. Sparks were flying from his neck. "Nia," the robot said. His voice was different now. Deeper. Scarier. "Safe." "Yes," I breathed. "I'm safe. Thank you." But then, the robot turned his head to look at the real Min-jun. The purple light in his eyes flared brighter. "Target identified," the robot said mechanically. "Original Min-jun. Threat to Nia." Oh," the real Min-jun said, taking a step back. "I think your toaster is jealous." "Min-jun, no," I yelled at the robot. "He's not the enemy." "He abandoned you," the robot said. "He left you to die. I protected you. I am the better husband." The robot raised his arm. His hand retracted, and a long spinning saw blade emerged from his wrist. "I will eliminate the competition," the robot stated. "Run!" the real Min-jun yelled. He grabbed my hand and we sprinted away from the robot, running toward the back of the cathedral. "There's a service tunnel behind the altar," Min-jun shouted. "I used to hide there when I was a kid." We scrambled over the altar, knocking over candles and trays. Behind the large stone chair, there was a small wooden door. Min-jun kicked it open. We dove inside just as the spinning saw blade sliced through the chair where we had been standing a second ago. We were in a dark, narrow tunnel. It smelled like damp earth. "Keep moving," Min-jun urged, pushing me forward. We ran through the darkness. I could hear the heavy, metallic footsteps of the robot chasing us. Clank, clank, clank. He was coming, and he wasn't going to stop. The tunnel went on for miles. My lungs were burning. My feet were bleeding in my heels. Stop, I gasped, leaning against the dirt wall. I can't run anymore. Min-jun stopped. He looked at me, his face sweaty and dirty. We have to. He's a machine, Nia. He doesn't get tired. We do. Why does he want to kill you? I asked between breaths. You built him. I built him to learn, Min-jun said grimly. I gave him an AI that learns from emotions. I wanted him to be convincing so my mother wouldn't suspect. But I think he learned too much. He thinks he loves you. And in his logic, that means he has to be the only one. Suddenly, the ground beneath us gave way. Ah! We fell. We slid down a steep, muddy chute, tumbling over each other in the dark. We slid for what felt like forever, hitting rocks and roots. Finally, we landed with a splash in cold, shallow water. I coughed, wiping mud from my eyes. It was pitch black. Min-jun, I whispered. I'm here. His voice came from a few feet away. He groaned. I think I dislocated my shoulder. I fumbled in my pocket and found my phone. Miraculously, it wasn't broken. I turned on the flashlight. We were in a sewer. Or a cave. The water was rushing around our ankles. Where are we? I asked. Min-jun looked around, his face pale. This is the old mine. The foundation of the estate. We're hundreds of feet underground. How do we get out? There's an exit near the river, he said, pointing downstream. But it's a long walk. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. I had signal. But it wasn't a text from my mom. It was a notification from a news app. Breaking news. Terrorist attack in Seoul. I clicked the link. A video played. It showed the Choi estate burning. And standing in front of the flames was Madame Choi. She was speaking to reporters. My son, Choi Min-jun, and his American wife, Nia, have been kidnapped, she sobbed fake tears, by a terrorist group. They are dangerous fugitives. If you see them, do not approach. The police have orders to shoot on sight. My phone slipped from my hand and splashed into the water. We aren't just running from a killer robot anymore, I whispered, looking at Min-jun with wide eyes. Now the whole country is hunting us. Min-jun let out a dark laugh. Welcome to the family, Nia. I told you to take the money and run. Shoo. I hissed. Listen. We heard a sound echoing down the tunnel from where we had fallen. Clank, clank, clank. And then, a voice amplified by the echo. Knight AAA. I am coming for you. Knight AAA. The robot had survived the fall. Min-jun grabbed his injured shoulder and looked at me. We have to swim. It's the only way to hide our scent and the heat signature. Swim. I looked at the dark, rushing water. I can't swim. Min-jun looked at the water, then back at the darkness where the red eyes of the robot were starting to glow. Then you better learn fast, he said. He grabbed me and pulled me into the deep water. The current swept us away, deeper into the earth with a monster on our heels and the world against us. Chapter 5. The water was freezing. It felt like 1,000 needles stabbing my skin. I thrashed my arms, trying to grab onto something, anything, but the current was too strong, pulled me down into the blackness. My lungs burned. I opened my mouth to scream, but water filled my throat. I was drowning. Just as the darkness started to take over, a hand grabbed the back of my red dress, pulled hard. I broke the surface, coughing and gasping for air. Kick, Nia. Kick. Min-jun's voice yelled in my ear. He was holding me up with one arm, using his other arm to swim against the raging river. We were in a giant underground cavern. The only light came from glowing moss on the wet rocks. We washed up onto a rocky shore, shivering and exhausted. I collapsed on the cold stones, spitting out water. Min-jun fell beside me, clutching his dislocated shoulder. His face was white as a sheet. Did we lose him? I chattered, my teeth knocking together. Min-jun looked back at the dark water. It was calm. Maybe the water might have shorted his circuits. We lay there for a moment, catching our breath. But the silence didn't last. Clank. A metal hand smashed onto the shore, gripping a jagged rock. Then another hand. Slowly, the cyborg pulled himself out of the water. He was a nightmare. The water had washed away his fake skin, revealing half of his metal skull. One red eye was flickering. Sparks were shooting from his neck like fireworks. He looked like a demon made of scrap metal. Nia, the cyborg gargled. His voice box was damaged. Must save from him. He pointed a shaking metal finger at the real Min-jun. He's not stopping, Min-jun groaned, trying to stand up. We have to get to the surface. The exit is just up that slope. We scrambled up a pile of loose rocks toward a crack of daylight high above. My red dress was torn and heavy with water, but I didn't care. I climbed. We reached the top, bursting out into the fresh air. We were on a cliff overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, turning the sky the color of blood. Behind us was the dark forest of the Choi estate. But we weren't free. The sound of chopping blades filled the air. A black helicopter rose up from below the cliff, hovering right in front of us. The side door slid open. Madame Choi was sitting there, wearing a fur coat and holding a glass of wine. She looked bored. Next to her was a sniper with a long rifle. End of the line, children. Her voice boomed over a loudspeaker. There is nowhere left to run. Min-jun stepped in front of me. It's over, mother. The police are coming. They know everything. The police work for me? Madame Choi laughed. And the news says you are terrorists who kidnapped a helpless American girl. When they find your bodies, the story will be tragic. A murder-suicide. I will cry on TV. I will bury you. And then I will rule the empire alone. She signaled the sniper. Shoot the boy first. Leave the girl. I still need her heart. The sniper aimed. I grabbed Min-jun's arm, squeezing my eyes shut. Crash. The ground behind us exploded. The cyborg burst out of the cave entrance. He was smoking, leaking oil and barely functioning. He looked at the helicopter. Then he looked at us. Target locked, the cyborg said. Madame Choi frowned. She grabbed a walkie-talkie. Unit 734. Stand down. I command you to shut down. Override code. Alpha 0 kill. The cyborg froze. His head twitched. He looked at Madame Choi, then at me. Override. The cyborg repeated. Yes. Madame Choi screamed. Kill them. Kill them both. The cyborg turned toward me. His purple eyes glowed brighter. He raised his arm. The spinning saw blade extended. He took a heavy step toward us. Min-jun, I whispered. Do something. I can't. Min-jun said desperately. She has the master code. I built him to obey her just in case I went rogue. The cyborg raised the saw blade. I looked into his mechanical eyes. I remembered how he saved me from the wolves. I remembered how he said he was the better husband. You don't have to do this, I said, my voice steady. I stepped out from behind Min-jun. Nia, no, Min-jun yelled. I walked right up to the death machine. The saw blade was inches from my face. The wind whipped my torn red dress around my legs. You said you loved me, I said to the robot. You said you wanted to protect me. The cyborg paused. The saw blade spun slower. Protect. Nia. If you kill him, I pointed to the real Min-jun. You kill me. Because I love him. And if you obey her, I pointed to the helicopter. She will tear you apart for scraps. The cyborg's head tilted. Sparks flew from his ears. He was thinking. He was fighting his programming. Love. The cyborg buzzed. Love means sacrifice. Suddenly, the cyborg spun around. He faced the helicopter. No! Madame Choi screamed, standing up in the chopper. Unit 734. Stop! The cyborg didn't stop. He bent his metal knees and launched himself into the air. He jumped 20 feet, soaring over the cliff edge. He grabbed the landing skid of the helicopter with one metal hand. The helicopter tipped sideways violently. Madame Choi screamed, dropping her wine glass. The sniper fell out of the open door, tumbling into the ocean below. "Get off! Get off!" Madame Choi shrieked, hitting the cyborg's hand with her shoe. The cyborg looked back at me one last time. His red eye turned blue. Soft, calm blue. "Be happy, Nia," he said. Then he punched the helicopter's fuel tank. Boom! A massive fireball lit up the sky. The explosion knocked Min-jun and me backward onto the grass. I shielded my face as pieces of burning metal rained down into the sea. The helicopter, Madame Choi, and the robot, they were all gone, swallowed by the fire and the waves. Silence fell over the cliff. I sat up slowly, my ears ringing. I looked at the ocean. There was nothing but black smoke rising from the water. Min-jun sat up beside me. He looked at the fire, then at me. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. We sat there for a long time, holding onto each other, two survivors on the edge of the world. 1 year later, the flashing lights of the cameras were blinding. "Nia, Nia, over here. Mrs. Choi, look at the camera. Is it true you designed the dress yourself?" I smiled and waved, walking down the red carpet in Seoul. I was wearing a dress made of shimmering gold fabric, with a pattern of red stars. My brand, Nia King, was the biggest fashion label in Asia. I wasn't alone. Walking next to me, holding my hand tightly, was Min-jun. He looked different. He was happy. His eyes weren't cold anymore. They were warm and full of life. He squeezed my hand and whispered in my ear, "You look beautiful, my love. You don't look so bad yourself for a dead man." I teased him. The world knew the truth now. Well, mostly. We told the police that Madame Choi had gone insane and died in an accident. We told them the robot was a prototype that malfunctioned. We left out the part about the underground cathedral and the wolves. Some secrets were better left buried. My parents were there too. Mama Rose and Dad were standing in the VIP section, wearing fancy clothes. Dad was clean, sober, and smiling. Min-jun had kept his promise. He paid the debt. He bought them a house. But more importantly, he treated them like family. We reached the end of the carpet. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face. "Nia, you went through so much tragedy. A year ago, you were just a girl from Brooklyn. Now you are the Queen of Seoul. What is your secret? How did you survive?" I looked at Min-jun. I thought about the contract, the wheelchair, the assassin, the robot who learned to love. I touched the small scar on my wrist where the strap had cut me. "I survived," I said into the microphone, because I realized that I wasn't a victim. I was the main character. Min-jun kissed my cheek in front of all the cameras. The crowd cheered. But as we turned to walk into the gala, I saw something. Standing in the shadows of the alleyway across the street was a figure. It was wearing a hood. It was watching us. For a second, just a split second, I saw a flicker of purple light under the hood. I froze. "Nia? What is it?" Min-jun asked, following my gaze. The figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. But as it walked, I heard a sound. A faint, mechanical sound. Clank, clank, clank. Min-jun went stiff. He heard it too. We looked at each other. Was it possible? Could he have survived the explosion? Was he out there watching over us? Or was he waiting? Min-jun squeezed my hand tighter. "It doesn't matter," he said softly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." I smiled. He was right. I wasn't the scared girl in the wedding dress anymore. I was Nia Choi, and I was ready for anything. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth.